My name is Fiona Decker, and I'm 32 years old. I've been a licensed electrician for 9 years. Not because I fell into it by accident, not because I couldn't get into university. I have a college diploma in electrical engineering technology from BCIT. I chose the trades because I'm good with my hands, I'm good under pressure, and there is something deeply satisfying about walking into a building and knowing that every light that comes on, every outlet that works, every panel that doesn't burn the place down, that's because of someone like me. My knuckles are nicked from tight junction boxes. My work boots have seen 3 British Columbia winters. I come home smelling like wire insulation and dry drywall dust, and I have never once in 9 years been embarrassed by that. Not until my sister made me feel like I should be. It was the first week of December when she called. I was on my way home from a job site in Burnaby, still in my work gear, rain jacket zipped up because Vancouver does what Vancouver does in December. I picked up on the second ring expecting something ordinary. Maybe she needed me to look at an outlet at her place. Maybe she was just checking in. Instead, there was that particular kind of pause on the line that you learn to recognize in your 30s. The rehearsed kind. The kind that means whatever comes next has been thought about and rethought, and is being delivered in the most careful possible packaging. Fiona, she said. About Christmas this year, I told her I'd already planned to bring the butter tarts. The ones our grandmother used to make, the ones with the slightly runny filling, that nobody can ever get exactly right, but that I've come close to cracking after 3 years of trying. I was going to bring 2 dozen. She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. There's something I need to tell you, she said, and her voice dropped the way voices do when the news is bad and the person delivering it knows it. My brother-in-law has some colleagues coming, people from his firm. It's a working dinner situation, she said. Very professional. He wants to make a certain impression and he's worried that if you're there and people start asking what you do. She stopped. Started again. He thinks it might make things awkward. That you'd come up in conversation and it would be. She paused again, difficult to explain. I didn't say anything for a moment. I just watched the taillights on the lug heat ahead of me. He thinks my being an electrician would embarrass him, I said. I didn't make it a question. She didn't say yes. She also didn't say no. She said that it wasn't personal, that it was just a professional situation, that these were people from Bay Street backgrounds, that my brother-in-law just needed everything to go smoothly. That I understood, didn't I? That I knew how important this was for his career? I told her I understood. And I did. Just not in the way she meant. I hung up and sat in my truck in the parking lot of a Safeway for about 15 minutes. There was a guy collecting carts in the rain, big orange vest, methodical about it, not rushing. I watched him line them up perfectly, and I thought about how work is work and dignity doesn't come with a job title, and I thought about how my sister had just called me a liability. The specific weight of that, being told that your presence at a family Christmas is a problem to be managed. It settles somewhere in your chest and stays there. It doesn't make you want to cry, exactly. It makes you very still. The kind of still that means you're deciding something. What my sister didn't know, what my brother-in-law didn't know, what nobody in my family knew yet, was that 6 weeks earlier I had passed my Red Seal interprovincial exam. And not just passed, I had scored in the top 4% of all candidates nationally that sitting. On top of that, 2 weeks before the phone call, I had been offered a junior partnership position at a mid-sized electrical contracting firm in New Westminster, the kind of firm that tenders on hospital retrofits and municipal infrastructure projects. The kind of partnership offer that at 32, for a woman in the trades, is genuinely unusual. I hadn't told anyone because I wanted to tell everyone at once, around the table, with the butter tarts. But they'd taken that moment from me, so I decided to let them have their Christmas. I was curious what the holiday would teach them without me there. Christmas Eve I spent at my friend Margot's place in East Van. Her partner Theo cooked, as he always does, and there were 8 of us crowded around a table that seats 6. And it was loud and warm and exactly the kind of evening where nobody cares what anyone does for work because everyone is just glad to be there. I went home around midnight. I slept well. Christmas Day I made myself a proper dinner. Roasted chicken with root vegetables, good bread from the Portuguese bakery on Commercial that was somehow still open in the morning, and yes, the butter tarts, because I was not going to let my brother-in-law ruin my grandmother's recipe. I ate at my kitchen table in the apartment I pay for with my own wages, and I felt, more than anything, peaceful. The particular peace of someone who knows something other people don't know yet. What I didn't know was what was happening across the city at my sister's townhouse while I was sitting in that quiet. My brother-in-law's name is Curtis. He works in corporate finance, has worked in corporate finance since his MBA, and has always carried himself with the particular confidence of someone who has never once had to wonder if his career choice would embarrass anyone at a dinner party. The colleagues he'd invited were two senior partners from his firm and their spouses, and one of those partners had brought his daughter, who was visiting from Toronto for the holidays and had tagged along. Her name was Ingrid, 29 years old, quick with a laugh, the kind of person who asks follow-up questions because she's actually listening. That's how my sister would describe her to me later, tripping over her own words trying to explain everything. Ingrid had grown up in a trades family. Her father, the senior partner, had started out as a plumber. He'd built his way through night school to an accounting designation, and eventually to Bay Street, but he talked about where he came from freely and without apology. Ingrid's older brother was a pipe fitter in Alberta, doing extremely well. Her mother had spent 20 years doing bookkeeping for a flooring contractor. The trades were not something Ingrid found embarrassing or awkward or difficult to explain. They were just the texture of her family. So when my brother-in-law, over the main course, made a smooth offhand comment about how he came from a family of professionals, everyone career-focused, very academically driven, Ingrid had smiled and asked if he had siblings. He said he didn't. His wife, my sister, said she had one. Ingrid asked what she did. My sister said, in the tone you use when you're hoping someone won't ask follow-up questions, that her sister worked in the electrical trades. Ingrid's face did something that my sister couldn't quite read at first. Then she said, "Oh, is she residential or commercial?" My sister didn't know. Ingrid asked if I had my red seal. My sister didn't know that either. Ingrid asked if I had my own contracts or worked under a company. My sister said she wasn't sure of the details. And then Ingrid asked the question that apparently changed the temperature of the entire table. She asked, very pleasantly, why I wasn't there. The room went quiet in that particular way that happens when everyone realizes simultaneously that a very uncomfortable truth is about to surface. My sister looked at my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law looked at his wine glass. And then, because she is not actually a dishonest person, just a conflict-avoidant one, my sister told the truth. That Curtis had thought it might be awkward, that he'd wanted to make a certain kind of impression. Ingrid's father, the senior partner, the former plumber, the man my brother-in-law had spent 6 months trying to impress, put his fork down, not loudly, very carefully. And then he looked at Curtis with an expression my sister described as the kind of look that ends conversations. Ingrid said that in her experience, people who did skilled trades work were often the most interesting people at any table. That her brother could tell you more about pipeline engineering over dinner than most people with engineering degrees. That she didn't think a Red Seal electrician was something anyone needed to explain away. Her father said nothing. That was its own kind of statement. The dinner didn't end badly, exactly. People finished their food. Wine was poured. Conversation moved on. But something had shifted, my sister said, in a way that never quite shifted back. Curtis spent the rest of the evening quieter than usual. The senior partner left without making the specific noises about the new year that Curtis had been hoping for. 4 days later, on the 29th, I heard a knock at my door. I was in my kitchen in wool socks and an old UBC sweatshirt making coffee and reading. I opened the door and found my sister, my brother-in-law, and my mother on my front step. My mother looked like she hadn't slept. My brother-in-law had the expression of a man who has spent 4 days losing an argument with himself. My sister looked, honestly, like she had been crying. I let them in. I made more coffee, because that's what you do. Even when the people standing in your kitchen have recently treated your career like a secret to be managed, you offer them something warm. My mother raised me with that, at least. My sister started talking first. She explained about Ingrid, about Ingrid's father, about the dinner, about what was said. She said Curtis had something he wanted to tell me. He stared at his mug for a moment. Then he said he'd found out about the Red Seal results. That Margot had mentioned something on social media, a congratulations post that my sister had apparently missed, but that a mutual friend had screenshot and sent her. I waited. He said, top 4% nationally. And he said it the way people say things when they're trying to absorb information that reframes something they thought they already understood. I said yes. And I said the partnership offer went through as well, and gave him the name of the firm, which he recognized immediately because they'd done the electrical work on a building his company occupied on Burrard Street. The silence that followed was the most satisfying one I've experienced in my adult life. I say that without apology. My father would have been proud, my mother said finally. She said it quietly, not to fill space, just because she meant it. I thanked her, and then I said plainly and without drama that it would have been nice to hear that before I was asked not to come to Christmas. She started crying. I handed her a napkin and let her. Some things have to be felt completely before there's any point in talking about them. My brother-in-law's apology was imperfect. I'll be honest about that. There was more explanation in it than there should have been, more reconstruction of his own reasoning than was strictly necessary. But it was real, underneath the self-justification, and I accepted it. Not entirely for his sake, mostly for my own. That particular kind of hurt is heavy to carry around, and I already do enough heavy lifting in my working life. What nobody said out loud, but what everyone in that kitchen understood perfectly, was the irony sitting right in the center of all of it. The thing Curtis had been ashamed of, the work clothes, the tool belt, the trade certification, the years of early morning job sites, was the exact thing that had made Ingrid's father look at him differently over the Christmas dinner Curtis had spent months planning. He'd tried to make me invisible and ended up making himself smaller instead. Ingrid and I connected about 2 weeks into the new year. She reached out through my sister, which I thought was a thoughtful way to do it. We met for coffee at a place in Gastown and talked for close to 3 hours. She told me about her family's firm, about how her father still gets visibly moved, driving past certain buildings in the financial district, because he remembers the plumbing rough-in from 30 years ago. I told her about the first time I ran a job site solo, a commercial tenant improvement on Granville Island, how the building inspector signed off without a single deficiency, and I sat in my truck afterward and didn't know what to do with myself for a full 5 minutes. We exchanged real numbers before we left. 2 months after Christmas, Ingrid's father reached out to me directly. He'd asked around about our firm after the holiday, apparently, and liked what he heard. He mentioned that his company was looking to establish a relationship with a mid-size electrical contractor for their managed properties in the Lower Mainland. He asked if I would be the right person to have that conversation. I told him I was exactly the right person. My brother-in-law tried to smooth me out of the room before he even knew what was in it. I still have the nicked knuckles. I still smell like wire insulation at the end of a long day. I still bring the butter tarts.